saw in the street was a Roman legionnaire. Now, when I was 8 years old, I was baptized in the swimming pool on Clark Air Force Base. I don't remember much about the baptism itself. I don't remember much about being dressed in white. I don't remember my father holding on his arms, clasping my nose. I don't remember much about it. What I do remember was a frog I caught. I caught a frog at the site. My mother forgot to bring an extra pair of underwear for me. So I had no underwear to wear underneath my pants when we went to go see Come Follow Me Boys at the Bamboo Bowl, which was a football stadium there on the base, and they had a big outdoor screen, and we watched the movie, and it was kind of rough on my little 8-year-old bottom, but that's what I remember. Not the symbolism of resurrection and rebirth. I don't even remember what happened to the frog. Now, when we talk about Paul's analogy of the whole armor of God, we typically picture some made-up Middle Eastern armor. We might picture Sir Lancelot on his horse. But what we don't picture is what Paul's audience saw, and that was a Roman legionnaire. Now, the armor of a Roman legionnaire in the early part of the latter half of the first century looked like this. What we see here, everything is historically accurate and appropriate for the time. Even the rectangular shields that we see in the movies and the videos, those don't happen until the 2nd century. So this is what the people of Ephesus saw in the streets. And there's deep symbolism built into this, which we miss when we picture Sir Lancelot on his horse. Now, one thing I am going to talk about that is not mentioned in Paul's analogy, but is implied, just like the underwear that my mother forgot to bring for me. Now, she's upstairs listening to this, and I'm not trying to embarrass her, and that is what the legionnaire is wearing underneath. Veronica is wearing a red tunica, or tunic. Now, the Romans got the idea for this tunica from the Spartans. It's red for a reason, because sweat and blood look the same on a red tunic. The point is, you don't want the enemy to know if you're bleeding. And the time to seek medical attention is when you're clear of the combat, when the battle is over. Until then, you press on. I like that symbolism, but it's implied rather than spoken outright. Now, Veronica, I'm going to take the shield away from you, and I'm going to set it over here, and hopefully it won't fall down. And I want to point out the belt that she is wearing. Paul talks about having your loins girt about with truth. It's the first thing that he mentions in his analogy. Now, the phrase girding up your loins, which is what we usually associate this with, only occurs once in the New Testament. And it's a Hebrew phrase. And he was talking to a Greek and Roman audience. So why is this belt so important? First thing that he mentions. By the way, the Roman legionnaire wore this whether he was in uniform or not. He wore this whether he was in armor or not. So what's so important about it? How much protection do you think those 5 strips of leather down the front provide? The answer is none. So what's so important? What truth is he talking about? Well, when you put on your uniform, your armor, you look like everyone else in the unit, unless you had a plume on your head, or you had, that was a symbol of rank, or a lion's skin, a wolf skin, or a bear skin. Those were symbols of rank for officers. But everyone else dressed like this. The only part of your uniform you could customize was the cinculum militare. That's a very fancy Latin phrase that means military belt. Now, on these 5 strips of leather, you would put images or emblems of your gods, for example. Neptune's trident, Jupiter's thunderbolt. If you were a Christian, you would put Christus. You didn't put a cross on there, by the way, because the cross was not a Christian symbol at this point in history. So, or you might put your mother's face or the emperor's face. In other words, what is this? This is your name tag. I have a couple of name tags here. This one is the one that my wife wears as a daily dose missionary. It says Sister Belt, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This is the name tag I wear in the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. It says David in great big letters, and then Belt in smaller letters, and it has the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. We don't call it that anymore. We call it the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square, but they haven't changed our name tags out yet. And the fact is, when I'm wearing this, or when Cindy is wearing this, I'll go to great lengths to avoid saying or doing anything that might embarrass the choir or the church. Long ago, there's a story about a fellow named David who fought a giant named Goliath. Saul offered, now we typically think of David as being a beardless youth, but a careful reading of the previous chapter tells us that he was an experienced warrior. It just wasn't his turn to be at war. He was supposed to be with the sheep. And when he came, Saul offered to let him wear his armor. King Saul did. But David demurred from wearing the armor, not because it didn't fit him, but because he didn't know how to fight in that set of armor. He had not proven it. So he took weapons he wore every day, his sling and stones. And he said, I am David, and I come to you in the name of the Lord God of Israel, whose armies you have defied. In other words, this is who I am. This is why I'm here. This is why I'm willing to face you, armed with nothing but stones, a sling, and my faith. Now, interestingly, I'm going to take the dagger from you here, Veronica. If you did something in the Roman army that was not worthy of death, and there were many, many punishments that were worthy of death, and there were many creative ways to inflict that death, but it was not worthy of death, but you had disgraced your unit, then you would be stood in front of the unit by the optian. That's the second-in-command officer with the plume that goes like this. And he would stand you in front of your unit, he would draw your dagger, and he would slice off your belt. This did 2 things. First, it turned your man's tunic into a woman's dress, symbolically unmanning you. And second, it stripped you of your name and honor. So what truth is it you go armed into battle with? Your truth, your testimony. This is who I am. This is why I'm here. This is why I'm leaving my family, my country. This is why I'm giving up everything for 2 years or 18 months. And I will do anything the Lord requires, and I will not disgrace his name. Now, I'm David Belt. We're going to talk more on Wednesday about another part of the armor. But my understanding is I have to be open for questions now. I don't know how those questions come in. Speak up.
We'll talk about something else then.
Or type something in, I don't know. Well, if that's all, then I'll answer questions later online. But I want to thank Veronica. I want to thank my lovely camerawoman, Cindy. And we'll be back Wednesday night. Thank you very much.